Okay, so this first lab is going to be fairly straightforward because there is no PHP involved. You are going to create a contact form using HTML. And there's a couple of things that you're going to have to do in this lab. After you have finished lab 12A, after you've finished typing in the code, in order to check whether it works, obviously this is just HTML, so you can just have it on your browser and you can check it in your browser. But the following lab, 12B, is going to be the PHP handle form, which deals with the content sent from this form. And so we're going to have to upload both of these files onto a server. And obviously, because we don't have access to the college server, then I've had to find a sort of replacement. And so what you will need to do is create an account on the 000 web host server. And the instructions are here. You can click on this and it will take you through step by step how to set up an account. And then you will save the file. Well, you can save it here. In fact, save it here. You're also going to need to upload it onto this server. Okay, so I've opened up the instructions and I'm just going to scroll down to the second page. This really does take you, it takes you through step by step what you need to do to create this lab, but I'm also going to do it myself in Notepad so you can see it in action. And so this is what your finished web page is going to look like. So you can see it's a simple visitor feedback form. It's going to ask them for the contact details. And we're also going to include radio buttons. So we haven't done forms before in HTML, and there are a number of different tags that obviously you'll need to familiarize yourself with. What we're going to use in this one are a bunch of input text fields like we have here. We're also going to use the drop-down list format, like I said before, the radio buttons. And then for the comments, if they want to write anything, then we're going to use what's known as the text area input. And I will put a link to the W3 Schools website where you can find out more about each of these different form tags. So the first thing you're going to do is go into Notepad and create a new document. You're going to save it as contact.html. Like I said, there's no PHP in this, it's just purely composed of HTML. And you are going to set up the basic structure. What we're going to do next is go into the body section. So let's just put a bit of space down here. And we're going to make it look like the example I showed you previously. So I'm going to use H3 as my medium-sized heading tag. And I'm going to write feedback form. And then I'm just going to have a very short paragraph explaining what the purpose is. So please enter your details in the form below, along with your comments. And I was listening back to one of the videos earlier and I realized how loud the keyboard clicks are, so I apologize for that. You can turn me down. I mean, by all means, turn me down and just follow what I'm doing. I will explain though as I go along, so, but I'll also write comments. Okay, so obviously you can save this at any point. Because it's just HTML, you can run it and launch it in, well, not Chrome, obviously. Let's try IE. Okay, so this is what it looks like at the moment. And maybe I'll put a full stop there. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is set up the form. And to do this, we use the form tag, like so. And we're also going to provide a couple of attributes. And the first attribute is going to be what's known as the action attribute. And this is basically directing the form. Where is this form going to be sent to when the user clicks on submit? And so we're going to be creating a form. Oh, sorry, not a form. We're going to be creating a PHP program which is going to handle this particular form. And we're going to call it handle_form.php. Okay, so this is what you will be doing in Lab 12B. And we also need, well, we don't need to, but we're going to. We also need to include the method attribute. And if you don't include this, it simply means that it will be sent using what's known as the get method. That's the default method. We don't want to do that. We want to use what's known as the post method, and you'll see this discussed in this week's presentation. But basically, when we use post, it means that we have much better security. The data isn't being sent via the address bar, it's not being added on to the URL, it's going separately. But you can see the various pros and cons in the presentation. Okay, so we've identified that we're setting up a form, and we've identified where it's going to go to and how it's going to get there. Okay, so the next step is to start adding in, and I'm going to start with the title. And in fact, I'm going to go back and add some comments in a moment, because really it won't make a huge amount of sense if I don't. And I'm just putting the title into a paragraph tag. And what I'm going to do is type in select name equals title, and this is where we're going to have the drop-down list. I'm also adding an additional attribute, which is what's known as the required attribute. And this basically ensures that you have entered a value into this field before you can actually go ahead and submit it. So you just required, you don't need to do anything else, just add required. So because we've got a drop-down list, we need to include these option values. So we're going to start off with Mr. and close that. And then we also need something which is actually going to be displayed. Okay, so we're going to have Mr. This is the text that will be displayed. And then we're going to close this option. And then we're going to do the same for the... And in fact, the previous one should say value, not values. I don't know where the S came from. Option value equals, and then let's have Mrs. I think that we need the full stop, but we'll put it anyway. And obviously the text to be displayed. And then close your option. And then we could have a long list. I'm just going to keep it simple, keep it sweet, and let's just do 3. So we'll have equals Ms. And then we'll close that and close the option. Okay, so we've set up, or we're setting up a drop-down list with 3 different options, and then we're going to close that list. So close the select tag, and we're also going to close that paragraph. Okay, I'm just going to go back and add in a few comments before I forget. So I'll start with the, and in fact it's probably going to be a multi-line comment. So I'll start with the form. So the action attribute gives the name of the file that will handle form, and the method, and like I said, is either going to be get or post. That will be used. Just actually, it could have been a single line. Doesn't matter. Okay, and then let's add in a comment just to explain what's happening here. This option defines a drop-down list and the required attribute prevents a form being submitted without either a value entered or selected. In this case, it's going to be selected. Okay, so let's continue. And again, it's a good idea just to get into the habit of saving it. Always save it first. Saving it and then running it each time, just so that you can make sure that you're on the correct. Good, that's fine. So let's go on to the next input type, which is going to be a text field. So again, I'll do the comments first. I think that probably makes more sense. So we'll have input type equals text. Defines And this is basically what we're going to use for most of them, a one-line text input field. We don't want them to write too much if they're just adding things like their name, and it's really not necessary. And so we're going to use paragraph tags again. We're going to type in first name, and then we're going to have our input type equals text. And then we are going to give this text field a name, and the name is simply going to be, with no spaces and no capital letters, it's simply going to be first name. And the reason why you need to name it is so that when you set up your PHP form, you have a way of identifying each of the text fields. So each of them is going to have a name. What I'm also going to do is set the size, because I don't want somebody leaning on the keyboard and entering 100 characters. So I'm going to set it to 20 characters. And like before, I'm going to make this so that it's a required field. And then what I'm going to do is just copy this and then obviously change it to last name. And if you're going to do this, make sure that you make all the changes that I'm making and change the name to last name. Okay. And then the email address is slightly different because we have a specific input type that we can use for emails. So the email input type basically checks that the email address is syntactically correct. We want to make sure that it's got the correct formats, for example. And so again, we'll have our open paragraph, we'll type in the label, email address, we'll add our input type, and this time we're using email. Name is also going to be email, and size, I'd go for, 30, I don't think it's going to be more than that. And we will obviously make this required, or else we've got no way of replying to them. And then close your paragraph. Okay, and then the radio buttons. Okay, so we want to have the option for the user to select from excellent, good, okay, mediocre. And so radio buttons are the most suitable option for this because they only allow you to select one radio button. If you were to use a checkbox, then you can have multiple checkboxes selected. But if you want to limit it to one, then this is really your option. So it sets up radio buttons, and because they all have the same value for the name attribute, that's why you can only select one of them. Name attribute, e.g. feedback, only one can be, move on to the next line, selected from 3, to 4 actually, from the 4 at a time. Okay, so paragraph, this slide is, and I'm going to move on to the next line. Just keep it neat. Input type equals radio. Name equals feedback, and that, like I said, is going to be the same for all of these, all 4 radio buttons. But the value is obviously going to change. So value equals excellent, and we want to make it required. Actually, no, we won't. We'll say that this one, it's up to them whether they want to include it or not. And so we're just going to write the label at the end, excellent, that will appear next to the radio button. And to save time, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it 3 more times. I would recommend that you don't do this, it's just me being lazy, because it's good practice. The more times you type something, the more likely you are to remember how it goes. So these remain the same, these remain the same, but obviously we want to have 4 different values. So we're going to have excellent, good, and then okay, and finally mediocre. Make sure you spell it correctly, mediocre, which just means me. Okay, all right, finally let's set up our text area. And the text area as you saw in the screenshot I showed you, this is for a multiple line input field. Okay, so defines a multiple line text input field. So you wouldn't use this for something like name, but you would use it where you have a sort of open-ended question and you're not sure how long it's going to take or how much room they're going to need. Okay, so input type equals, oops, wrong. I've moved on too far. I don't want to do the submit button yet. I'm still doing text area. So we're going to have our paragraph. We're going to label it comments. We're going to set it up as a text area, name equals comments. We're going to specify that it will have 3 rows and that it will have 30 columns. And then we're going to close that opening text area tag, and then we're going to provide the closing text area tag. And then finally we're going to close the paragraph. Okay, so now we've asked everything that we want to ask. We're going to have our closing, our submit button. So create submit button to enter data or send form, however you want to put it. And so here we're going to use input type again, equals submit, and we're also going to give it a name, equals submit, and value equals, and so this is what will appear on the button itself, submit form. And then go ahead and close that. And don't forget, you need to close your form tag. Okay, and obviously you should have your closing body tag and your closing HTML tag at the bottom.